Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Fall 2023 New Jersey Film Festival Filmmaker Q&A series. This is the first one we're recording for the fall, and we have a wonderful filmmaker from Ireland who's going to be talking about his amazing feature film entitled Hole in the Head. The filmmaker is Dean Kavanaugh. He's below me here. And then to my left, and perhaps to your right, we have Anita LaBelle, who is one of the festival jurors. And we're going to be asking questions of Dean about his movie for the next 25, 30 minutes. But before we jump in and talk to them, I just wanted to let you know that the Fall 2023 New Jersey Film Festival is our 42nd annual. It's actually a biannual festival, and we've been doing this since 1982. And we're very proud to be able to bring independent, international, experimental documentary films to New Jersey, and we've been doing that for a long time. So we will be doing our Fall 2023 version between September 8th and October 8th. And the festival is a quasi-hybrid festival. Because of COVID, we still have an online component. We have one person who lives in Oklahoma, and she watches everything. She gets an all-access pass each season, and we have a number of people like that we developed because of COVID. So we didn't want to alienate our new audience, and so there will be online screenings for all of the films, and there will also be in-person screenings, and they will be taking place in our state-of-the-art facility, which is Voorhees Hall. It's a large lecture hall at the Rutgers University campus. It's room 105, and it's located at 71 Hamilton Street in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I'll give you more information about that towards the end of our interview when I show you how you can buy tickets and stuff. Okay, well, welcome. The wonderful photograph behind me is a still from Dean's film, Hole in the Head. And it's a film that is really a very complex film in many ways. It's a meta film. It's a film about filmmaking. It's a kind of autofiction, as he likes to call it. And there's a hauntology that goes on. And if those things don't mean much to you, don't worry. We'll make it very clear as we move forward in our interview. So welcome, you guys. Thanks again for joining us. I guess my first question to you, Dean, is going to be, you're an active filmmaker for many years, almost 2 decades worth. You've made 70 short films, 6 feature films. And this film, I think, is perhaps an amalgam of all your previous films in some ways. Is that true?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Like a way of rearranging my memory of making those films in a way, both within the story and I suppose within, I suppose a technical ability also, having made the others and worked in the industry as well as that. But yeah, it feels like it's got one foot in the past and then another foot kind of outstretched somewhere else.
Moving forward, yes, because this kind of analog versus digital, and we're big Super 8 fans. We run the longest running Super 8 festival in North America, and so Super 8 is very dear to my heart because that's how I started. I was an active Super 8 filmmaker for many years, and so I think that was a draw for me. But I wasn't actually a judge for this category, and Anita was. So Anita has a battery of questions for you. Go ahead, Anita. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, well, jumping off what you were just talking about, I know that you like mixing contemporary and legacy technologies. Why do you enjoy mixing the two? Like, what inspires you about mixed media?
Um, I think it's the idea that how these two things have very separate histories, and I suppose digital is such a it's so incredibly different to, for example, shooting like for Super 8. And I suppose like it you the idea of having a tactile aspect to digital cinema is something that I've always really been interested in. And I've tried many different ways of obtaining that or creating that, recapturing images multiple times and so on. But ultimately, I suppose um, being as a technician as well, like I'm also a film archivist. So working with this kind of media, with Super 8 film, with 16 millimeter film, with VHS, all of this stuff, it has a very specific makeup and it has a very specific history. And I've seen so many times in other films where when it's digitized, when it's brought into that other world, it doesn't quite look, there's always some kind of error, or it doesn't quite look as it should. And so I guess while I'm very interested in playing with these different formats, ultimately I really want to treat them appropriately. So that's also something I find that's a challenge, and makes me want to use these formats as a challenge, that you know obeying their rules and finding out the different rules that they have, that you only really find out when you move them into this digital kind of realm. Because otherwise it's, a DVD on a CRT monitor looks fantastic. It looks incredible. The quality is usually, it's phenomenal. And then, you play it on a 4K TV and suddenly it doesn't look so great. And that in unto itself has a lot of interesting kind of narrative properties, I suppose. But as a long story short, I'm interested by the challenge of it, and that that these formats do have a narrative potential. And I think when you cross over from one into another, you kind of create this drama or this kind of mini conflict, which can be interesting. But yeah.
No, it's very cool. And I guess we need to let our audience know a little bit about your film. I mean, you focus on John Kline Jr., who is a mute part-time projectionist and an amateur filmmaker who is doing some kind of reconnaissance or archaeological work to find out what happened to his parents, correct? Maybe you
Correct,
should
yeah.
tell your audience a little bit about the film first, since I don't want to butcher it. And
Oh, no, yeah,
you know.
sure. Yeah, it's a complicated one. So basically it's at its heart, it's about an amateur filmmaker who works in a cinema as a projectionist. And when he was 7 years of age, his parents disappeared in a sort of traumatic way, in a way that was so traumatic that he has no memory of the incident or of anything leading up to it, and he can no longer communicate verbally. And he's decided now, as a relatively fully grown man, that he wishes to move back into his family home and hire actors to play his parents, in the hope of somehow figuring out what occurred when he was a child. And that's kind of where things begin to kind of go off the rails. So like you were saying earlier, Al, it does have this kind of film within a film aspect. And as Anita, you were saying as well, like it does cross, or it is a tapestry of lots of these different legacy formats. So yeah, it has all this kind of texture, I suppose, narratively and visually and sonically as well, I suppose. But yeah.
Very much so. I think the word tapestry is really eloquent. I called it a quilt in my mind when I was watching it, where you kind of quilt together. So I think they're kind of the same things, and you really weave together the different formats to tell the story. You start in, the movie begins in obscurity because we have this very beautiful shot of the Irish landscape, where we see the fog rolling out and we see these sheep being exposed. And at the end, we kind of, the image kind of closes down. So I like that music box kind of feel to the film itself, where we are able to go inside the mind of this young man who's suffering from trauma, and to experience the world as he sees it and hears it too. So
that's great. I love the music box idea. That's really good.
well, as I was watching your film, and I've read so much about your film, I thought, I know that Dean is a big Peter Greenaway fan. He must be a Peter Greenaway fan, because a lot of the stuff, as we're walking and we're following John Kline Jr. as he's investigating what happened. We have exhibit number 1, exhibit number 2, and that, to me, the kind of classification that you have in Peter Greenaway's films was very evident. But you take it in a completely different direction, which I really love. So,
Oh, that's great.
are you a Greenaway fan?
I am, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the cook, the thief, is definitely. I remember it was a big part of when I was watching films as a teenager. That was when I found in the library, and it was like, what, I'd never seen anything quite like it. Drowning by Numbers and Z and Two Knots, and yeah, these are like really very formative Yeah, he's definitely someone who I'd cite as an influence. Yeah, and of course people like Godard and would be kind of a major influence in terms of image and sound, or just how to question the image and how to engage with image and sound and text in a way. And then other like more diaristic filmmakers like Anne Charlotte Robertson or someone like this who
Wow.
really is kind of making like this kind of diaristic cinema I find really
Well, that's
interesting.
so cool because I was friends with her and we did a retrospective screening of her work after she
Yeah,
passed
yeah,
away. And so it's so funny because I was on a panel with her and she was such an amazing
yeah.
person, and we both love cats. So it was really easy be friends with her, but she's unfortunately passed away. But
Mm.
that's so cool that you liked her work and it's Super 8 at its best. But Anita, I don't want to hog all the questions, so I see to you again, please.
Yeah, so I think one thing about this film is I thought it was balanced beautifully. I know it deals with some darker material with its whole discourse around trauma, but I actually found it was really funny. There's a lot of comedy throughout. What was it like balancing the two and figuring out the timing in these more like serious settings?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was that was all down in the definitely in the screenplay. Just trying to have this. I guess the humor really comes out as a kind of it because the material does get quite dark, and you're kind of in a film within a film within a film, and it just can be quite challenging at times, and then it can also be challenging, and you're trying to remember where you are within the project, and then it's also quite dark, and then to have a humor just as a way of offsetting some of that, or I think it's a really good point as well that the humor never kind of, even though it's incredibly potentially problematic, if you were to, this is a Farrelly Brothers movie, for example, I can only imagine where the punchlines might be. But I think it's important that we're never really laughing at the character. We're laughing at the humor really arises through the tension between the character and the situation. And I think by heightening the situation around a very abnormal character. It almost kind of decreases his abnormalities, perhaps his quirks, and makes him seem like totally normal because everything else is like a room on fire or something. I think that's kind of where that interplay of drama and kind of comedy comes in. And then also, I just think sometimes it's just so grim that the only thing to do really in those situations is to kind of laugh. Um, yeah, like kind of laughing at a funeral while being at a funeral or something. It's like this strange compulsion. But that was the kind of influence to get that structure and that balance. Because the characters some of them are pretty awful. I mean, his father, the actor who plays his father, is not a nice human. Uh, he's very prickly. And no one really has a lot of empathy for John, the protagonist. I think he's stuck in this situation, and we arrive in the story towards the end of their tenure there at this location, so everything is very fraught, and John really doesn't get a good deal. He gets a bad shake, but I think that's the mixture of drama and comedy. I think come from that um, as a way of taking the edge off some of the stuff in a way. I
Well,
hope.
that's a good segue because I wanted to ask you about how you came to work with James Devereaux and Lynette Callahan, as well as John Curran and even John Allen too. I mean, this is a nice tight ensemble that you worked with. I get the sense that you kept it tight, so it was easy, more manageable because you had to deal with so many different media and inside outside. You used the Irish Film Institute. I recognize the theater. I've been there
Oh,
many
right.
times. We were in Dublin last summer, and one of my previous assistants, Caroline Gilligan, used to work there. So I'm very
Okay.
familiar, and I know you shot there, and not just in the theater, but in the space itself, which is very cool. But tell us how you found these four characters to be in your film.
Well, in terms of in terms of the actors, I mean James, John, yeah. So I knew James Devereaux for around 7, 8 years, and he actually contacted me. We shot this film during COVID, during the lockdowns. So James asked emailed me about shooting a film for him, because I also sometimes work as a cinematographer for hire, and I happened to have the script and we were looking for someone to play the father character, and we sent it to him and he really liked it. That's how we got him on board. And the second we considered, I don't know why I never thought of him, because the character's name is James as well. And the second, once I had him in my mind and I read it as if he were playing it, it just made perfect sense. And John Kern is someone I've collaborated with since I was in college, since around 2010, 2009. We've long-standing. He's in a lot of my work, and I guess he's incredible comic timing, and it's something that we always wanted to tap into more. And I thought this would be the perfect kind of role for him. And he's an incredible actor, incredible performer, and a long history of improv comedy and so on. Really great guy. And Lynette Callahan, I met Lynette through the casting, but I also had seen a bunch of her films over the years at film festivals and stuff. So it's kind of how it came together. And John Allen, I've known, just like John Curran, all the Johns, so many Johns. I've known him for many years as well. So yeah, like you say, it was the idea of this is a really small team. We had very severe restrictions here for COVID. I mean, we couldn't leave 2 kilometers beyond our home, and in order to even get on the road with this film, there was no kind of rules. We were typing up these fake documents to show to the patrol or the whatever, so we could go on the freeway to go, you know. So it was very much a kind of Herzogian kind of approach to getting it done, and I was very lucky with the team we had because everyone was really game for that. So that was great, and we were all stuck in this house for around 9-10 days, and there's no hot water in one of the bathrooms. It was just it was a bit of a nightmare, but it was great, and they all made it really good fun. And we played charades and balderdash, I think was one of the games, which was very fun. Yeah, so it was a great time. It felt like therapy, and I'm sure they all needed it after the production, but yeah, that's how I found everyone, and we kind of got them there. And it's funny you mentioned the IFI. Yeah, the IFI is an incredible place. And we filmed in Cinema One. We filmed up in the projection booths. We filmed in cinema down in the archives, and so that was great. And we filmed in in Cork, in Kerry, and Galway, and we filmed all over Ireland. Again, by forging our little papers. And we were never stopped by any of the cops at any point. When we'd see a checkpoint, we just rolled into the trucker lane and no one bothered us. They assumed, and we had someone wearing a high-vis jacket. That's one, for us to give one tip. I'm sure everyone knows this already, but get a load of high-vis jackets, because no one questions anyone with a high-vis jacket. So that was, it was really a film made by the skin of our teeth. We had a really small budget. But yeah, we got it done. A lot of favors went into getting it across the line. But yeah.
Well, tell us about Anya, because Anya Mahler is your co-conspirator. I get the sense that she is you divvied up many of the responsibilities with her. You were the editor, the cinematographer, the director, and she was the co-producer, as well as doing costume design and many other things. So can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah. Anya is an incredible creative force. Anya is a film archivist as well as a visual artist. Her work on this film was as a producer, and she's produced a number of my films in the past. And this was a huge undertaking because just of the complexity of negotiating with the unknown of the lockdowns and everything. But I mean, we were such a small team. I mean, we were 9 people in the I think 9 or 10 people in the house, and you have separate schedules for each person, and they can't really go anywhere. You're literally in the middle of nowhere. So she's trying to not only make sure that everyone's comfortable, but making sure that everyone is sort of entertained, and that and then also developing a COVID safety plan in case anyone gets sick. We send them out into the bunker that we dug in the ground outside, of course. Like, cover them in petrol and flick the match in. So we had all this ready to go, but I've collaborated with Anya on many things in the past. We specifically, she's done some expanded cinema performances that have been incredibly kind of complex, with like essentially building lenses in a space with an audience, and creating images live. Pretty incredible, using like Python programming and, you know, command line stuff, and then also old and new technology again, kind of interacting. And you know, like while we were doing this, when we were finishing in early 21, when we were finishing Hole in the Head, we were in post. I think we are also doing some B-roll or some pickups. We were also doing a circus show where Anya and I were collaborating as technicians, and performers in this in the visual aspect of this incredible circus performance called by a group called Lucy Smokes. And yeah, we did that there was 2 weeks of shows in Cork, and another 2 weeks of shows in Kilkenny. So we were really, really busy. But again, she's immaculate in her organizational skills. So I'd still be in the house in Carlow, probably in the COVID pit if she wasn't involved. So it's all down to her for getting it across the line.
Very cool. When Anita and I were talking the other day on the telephone prior to our interview, and you know, I said this is a COVID film because the plague reference is pretty obvious that there's some kind of relation to this, you know, disaster that we're all going through. And the film dealing with memory is something that you did a lot during COVID, because there was so much shut out that you had to look inward for ideas, for you know, what am I doing, and that kind of mentality, you know. So we really love the film, and I think audiences will really appreciate the meticulous nature of the film, how you go from one format to the next seamlessly, and you know, people will notice the aspect ratios shifting, and I think that's really one of the wonderful things about the film, because you're always aware that you're watching a film, and yet you're inside the mind of this troubled individual and trying to figure out what you know what he's dealing with. And I think the doppelganger with the dummy, you know, I think of John Jr. as the audience. You know, he's mute, and I thought also of Transformers for some reason when I first watched the film. I didn't know he was mute, right? Because he's listening on headphones. There's a storm rumbling in, and then he's responding, and it's almost like Bumblebee in Transformers, where he's using the radio to kind of comment on the scene. So I didn't realize if he was typing the answers on a gizmo, like a Kurzweil machine or something, where, you know, the blind can speak or listen. And I thought that was all really cool stuff. So
that's great. That's great. You know, I thought it was an interesting challenge from the beginning. He was never, I always wanted him to be somewhat mute, but it's also the idea that, is he really mute? Is he playing someone who is? That kind of tension is, again, quite kind of dark, problematic, and interesting. But then I kind of felt initially maybe there's an idea that he was going to have maybe sign language was something, but the idea of him having a voice was quite important, that there would be some kind of interaction between him and the room and the space. So I thought it was quite important that you hear the haptics on the device, and I think it's quite nice. And it should look like it's like talking to anyone these days, you know, like they're constantly on their phone looking up, sure, cool, and this is like a guy who has to do this, and it's just it's kind of interesting as well, I suppose, in terms of in his case it's entirely polite.
Cool. Anita, please jump in. We have time for a couple more questions from you, because I don't want to ask any more. Go ahead.
Speaking about John and him being the main protagonist, I saw that this film was described as an autofiction, and it was my first time coming across that term, so I looked it up, and how it's a mix of like fiction and autobiography. And something that I thought was interesting was, no matter which definition I read, they always pointed out that fiction and autobiography are known for having inconsistent or unreliable narrators. That kind of format lends to this kind of, should we trust them? Can I believe what I'm saying? This analysis that comes with in taking this form of media. Is there a reason you chose autofiction, or a reason you gravitated towards it?
I suppose there was a certain point where early on in the writing that, well, first of all, I mean, I do like enjoy a lot of autofictional works, but there was quite a stage like early on where it just made sense for me to kind of use a lot of the kind of experience, some of the experiences that I've had, and put them in there. And then ultimately, like I've been in some weird situations. Like I've worked in the film industry for like maybe like 15 years or so, in every possible think of a role, and I've pretty much probably done it. And you meet a lot of crazy people, if I can use the term, a lot of unusual characters, and you know what? If even if I'm telling the truth, people might not believe. So that was the starting point. Was like, okay, well, this character is. It would make sense if he did that, or if he behaved in this way or that way. And I remember a person who did this, and that was kind of interesting. So naturally, once it wasn't just borrowing from things you know, like you write what you know, whatever, but it became more of a, okay, how many other things can I squeeze out of certain experiences that I remember? And before I knew it, I kind of realized, okay, this is actually, yeah, this is quite an autofictional process. And I kind of just, and also it was quite popular at the time. I mean, I know it's still popular. Some people think it's a quite a lazy style. Um, in my opinion, it depends on the work, but um, yeah, I think it really just it fit this project very well. Because John really makes films the way I made films for a very long time. And we made this film actually very similar to how John makes his film. When you don't have a lot of money, it can be very smash and grab. So it's the art of smash and grab, I suppose. It's the auto-fictional kernel there.
Cool.
I love that. I think like you were talking about such a small team, but when I was watching the film, I I never got that sense. It felt like there was a giant crew working on it. The cinematography was incredible. The landscape, I know you said it was shot in Ireland, it felt like its own character. How important were these locations to you in telling the story?
Oh, thanks. They were the one of the most important part. I think the images are like the sound and the image are another character in the film. I've always treated it that way, and this film is no different. It was very important to find these locations. I mean, in a way, we're trying to tie together these different, very obviously, well, if you live here, it's very obviously different parts of Ireland, and try to make them almost like one guy's backyard, and that was quite important. And I mean, for example, the image that Al has behind him there, that's in Connemara, a very kind of famous-ish, well, quite famous mountain range. And we wanted to go there in autumn where it's that color. And in fact, it should have been more orange. You know, this is like Tim Robinson's country. You know, I wanted it to be more orange, but like unfortunately, due to climate change or whatever, it wasn't. We needed to wait longer, and we didn't have the time. But like that's the kind of level of detail we really wanted specific locations to look a certain way. The house, for example, was something that I found in a like a country life interview from like 15 years ago or something.
Wow.
And I couldn't find an Airbnb, couldn't find it anywhere, couldn't find anything at all. And then I reverse image search this tiny pixelated thumbnail till eventually I found something that looked similar. And we found the house. It took a few months. So that was another kind of journey. And then when I was writing one of the final versions of the script, we didn't know how big the rooms were. We didn't know anything. We couldn't see. And we were building, I was building this kind of blueprint of where the rooms were in relation to other rooms. So when we actually finally got there, you know, none of it was obviously as I thought it would be. So like outside a window, there was like a corridor. I assumed this window led out to the garden. Like it was no, that's just a corridor. So we had to then, rather than deal with that, we decided to dress the set like I imagined it. And so we
Mm.
put lights outside the window. It was just a lot easier to operate within the fiction, I suppose. But the locations were incredibly important, and I think when you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of resources, this really is where the production value is. So it was quite important. It was worth the travel. I mean, like there's some shots of like a mountain or some trees, and we went to Kerry. It was like a 4 hour drive or something to go there because we knew I'd photographed something there years before. I knew that was there. So yeah, I guess there's the autofiction coming through again, maybe, but yeah, so yeah, the locations were very important.
I think as both of us are filmmakers as well, I think probably at different ends of the spectrum for Anita and myself, but you always infuse yourself in your work. I think that just goes without saying. And I mean, watching your film the first time, I needed to kind of piece it together, but the second time it was an easier watch because I had already realized the parameters of the film, and I loved, seeing outside of John's bedroom window or whatever he is. There's Jupiter outside, or it's what looks like Jupiter outside as well. And I love that because we are now in this world and we are experiencing it, and you lead us along brilliantly. The references to so many other movies, whether it be the Burning film from Bergman's Persona to, I mean, as a film person, it's really a filmmaker's film. And there's so many references to other films, and yet it's your own. And I think you have really to be very proud of that. And I think we've run out of time to talk, but I do want to show our audience how they can buy tickets and stuff. So bear with me as I share screen. And so folks, if you want to buy tickets, you will normally go to our regular website, which is njfilmfest.com. This is our website that was designed by Prajesh Patel. We had this old, analog website up for many years, and I had a wonderful student who refurbished it. And now you can see the space that we are showing in. This is Voorhees Hall in the background. That's the hall where we show movies. And all you have to do is hit current events, and it'll drag you down to the where everything normally would have been. But because of COVID, we partnered with Eventive, and they do our streaming. So I based the website for the festival there. So you click on that red button and it bounces you to our Eventive website. And here you can see all of the films and a catalog page. You can go to our welcome page, which is very generic. But the red buttons are where you want to go. So if you wanted to see the schedule in a linear way, you could do it this way with big pictures and blurbs for all the movies. And I still haven't said when your film is playing, and I'm getting to it. It's playing on Friday, September 22nd. It'll be online for 24 hours. So you can start watching at 12 midnight, 12:01. And it's on for the entire day. And the great thing about it is if you start watching at 11:45 on Friday in the evening, you still have 24 hours to finish it. So that's one of the good things of working with Eventive. The in-person screening will be at 7 p.m. and there are two shorts that are playing prior. Evan Bodie won Best Animation at our most recent festival, and he's back with another film called Out of Frame, which I think really, as my job as curator is to find a home for these films that the jury gives me. And I thought this has got to go with Dean's movie. And June by Lauren Stevens is also a very sweet film. It's a little bit different, but I think there's some connections for sure. And then of course, here's a nice photograph from Hole in the Head. And so you can see the schedule this way in a linear way. You can go to the catalog page to buy tickets. So you would go here and then you would click pre-order now. You need to register, but you register once and you're registered forever. And then you can watch the movies that way. And you could always go to our film guide, which lists all the films individually. And here's the nice poster for Hole in the Head. And you click on that, you get more information about the film that way as well. So I'm going to stop sharing. The tickets are $15 for the in-person and the online version. We have a number of people that watch the film during the day, and then they come in the evening to watch it on the big screen, which is the way I would prefer it to be forever. And I know, Dean, you're the same. I heard in another interview, you're a big proponent of in-person and big screen projection, so am I. So we do have a number of people that do that, and your ticket allows you to do both. So that's one of the great things that we have. If you would like to get an all-access pass, it's $100. It's about half price. So if you want to see everything and save some money, that's a great thing to do. So anyway, so I want to thank you, Dean, for hanging out with us for a while. We're almost 40 minutes. That's great. And
It's a pleasure.
time went by. I think we could talk for hours, but in the olden days, we used to have travel money and we would have flown you over, but that was the first
Hey,
thing. Our,
next time you're in Ireland, let me know. Like, I didn't know you were over here
yes,
so
I'm
recently.
there
Yeah.
often, and my wife and I are big fans. I would love to meet you in person. And Anita, thank you
Likewise.
also for hanging out and asking questions of Dean. And we'll be definitely keeping tabs on your career. We look forward to seeing your new film when it comes out. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much.
All right, let's do this.